Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to the questions based on jurisprudence. The first question: what are the two types of legislation? The two types of legislation are primary legislation and a secondary legislation. What is primary legislation? Primary legislation consists of laws enacted by the legislature, such as acts, statutes, or codes. Give an example of primary legislation. The Indian Penal Code and the Constitution of India are examples of primary legislation. What is secondary legislation? Secondary legislation consists of laws made by an executive authority under powers conferred by primary legislation. Give an example of secondary legislation. Administrative rules, regulations, and orders are examples of secondary legislation. How does law help resolve disputes? Through courts and legal institutions, they provide a fair conflict resolution mechanisms. What rights does law protect? Rights such as life, liberty, and property. How does law promote social justice? By addressing inequalities and protecting vulnerable groups. Why does utilitarianism support punishment as a deterrent to prevent a future harm? How does utilitarianism justify legal penalties like fines or imprisonment? By minimizing crime and promoting societal well-being. How does law address social inequalities? By promoting justice, equality, and human rights. Why must legal systems balance control and freedom? To prevent oppressive laws that infringe on civil liberties. What replaces the state in a communist society? Self-management and a communal cooperation replace the state in a classless society. How did Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India 1978 expand the principle of reasonableness? The court held that any law or executive action affecting life or liberty must be reasonable, fair, and just, reinforcing procedural fairness under Article 21. Why is the principle of reasonableness important in judicial review? It ensures that state actions are not arbitrary, excessive, or unconstitutional, protecting fundamental rights and maintaining fairness in governance. How does the dictatorship of the proletariat contribute to the withering away of the state? It is a transitional phase where the proletariat controls the state to dismantle class structures, leading to the eventual disappearance of the state. What is the final stage of the transition to communism? A fully communist society without a class divisions or a centralized state. How does the withering away of the state help end alienation? It ends alienation by ensuring that work is based on human needs rather than profit. Why did Karl Marx criticize the state even in its democratic form? Karl Marx saw the state as a tool of repression that it could not achieve true freedom until it dissolved. What are some key contributions of feminist legal scholars? They have redefined legal concepts, pushed for legal reforms, and critiqued traditional legal theories to promote gender justice. What principle did John Stuart Mill introduce regarding individual freedom? The harm principle. According to the harm principle, when should the law limit individual actions? When those actions harm others. What are the key characteristics of law? Authority, coercive power, universality, and evolution. What are transcendental theories of law? They are theories that view law as rooted in higher universal principles beyond material and social realities. What is the relationship between transcendental theories and natural law? Transcendental theories are closely related to natural law, which holds that legal systems should reflect universal moral principles inherent in human nature. What was the main issue in K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India 2017 case? The case addressed whether the right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21. What was the Supreme Court's ruling on the right to privacy in the Puttaswamy case? The court ruled that privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21 and that any restrictions on it must be reasonable and backed by law. What was the significance of Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India case 2023? The court decriminalized the homosexuality in 2018 and later debated the recognition of same-sex marriages, affirming individual rights and equality. Which philosopher linked human law to eternal law and natural law? St. Thomas Aquinas. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, what happens if a human law contradicts natural law? It is not a valid law and lacks moral legitimacy. How does law reflect societal values? By formalizing ethical and moral principles through written and enforced rules. Why is law essential for a society? It ensures order, justice, and a protection of rights. What are the key features of legislation? The key features of legislation are that it is written, supreme in most legal systems, and flexible. Why is legislation considered supreme in many legal systems? Legislation is supreme because it has a priority over other sources like precedents and customs. Give an example of a religious normative system. The 10 Commandments in Christianity or Sharia law in Islam. How did Immanuel Kant contribute to transcendental theories of law? Immanuel Kant argued that law must be grounded in rational principles that are universally applicable. What is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative in legal thought? It is the idea that laws should be based on universal justice and rationality, respecting human dignity and autonomy. How do transcendental theories view the legitimacy of law? They believe law must align with a higher ethical or moral truths not just a government authority or majority rules. Which philosopher's natural rights theory argued for law based on life, liberty, and property? John Locke. Why should the laws be flexible according to utilitarianism? To adapt to new societal needs and maximize public good. What should happen to a law if it no longer serves the public good? It should be reformed or repealed. What is the function of norms in unions? To regulate collective bargaining, dispute resolution, and membership rights. How do unions enforce their normative systems? Through labor agreements, membership codes, and workplace safety norms. What issue was addressed in the Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association versus Union of India case 2015? The case dealt with the judicial appointments, striking down the NJAC and reaffirming the collegium system to maintain judicial independence. What principle did the Hussain-era cartoon case 1980 establish? The Hussain-era cartoon case 1980 affirmed the right to a speedy trial as part of the right to life under Article 21. What are clubs and how do they use normative systems? Clubs are social groups with a shared interests that establish rules for membership, conduct, and participation. What is the main criticism of legal positivism by transcendental theorists? They argue that positivism ignores the moral foundations of law and reduces it to state-made rules. How do transcendental theories influence modern legal thought? They shape a human rights law and a constitutional law by emphasizing universal moral standards. Who are the three figures associated with the transcendental theories of law? St. Thomas Aquinas, Immanuel Kant, and John Locke. Give an example of a normative system in a club. Membership criteria in a professional association.